Okay, very quickly write down what 3 things that you would like to take away from this session. Let me test whether I have been able to do justice to your expectations. Write down 3 takeaways from your session that, based on the topic that you heard. How would you take learning and development from HR to a boardroom context? So that's broadly the rough understanding of the title. Right? Can I see a show of hands if you have completed it? Three things, each of you. The last rows, middle rows, still writing? Okay, there's one gentleman, that's it. Anyone else? All done? Can I see a show of hands before, otherwise I'm not getting started. Okay, a few more hands. Yes, some more. Okay. Right, so I'm going to start off with this disclaimer here. You know, in the previous speaker spoke about a lot of AI, and the era where there is a lot of AI, you know, the work and the work products that is getting generated out of human intelligence have to be specifically called out, you know, saying that this is a product of human intelligence and not that of AI, right? So I guess what I will be talking to you about, as you would have by now known, is about how do you take the learning and development function and move that from the realm of the human resources to all the way up to the boardroom, right? And find a seat at the table in another ways if you look at it. The second dimension of looking at that is how do we make this as a business driver. I think the previous panelists also spoke about how do you make this as a business enabler rather than courses and curriculums, right? So before I segue into this, I want to kind of lay the backdrop of a few things so that, you know, then the context is clear. This journey is pretty hard. It's not easy, right? It's quite easy to come here and make a presentation, but it is very difficult to make it happen in reality, right? And I've made my honest attempt in making that happen and fairly been successful to some degree, right? So I would be sharing some of those thoughts. Before I go there, I would like to kind of set the backdrop for the whole, what I'm going to talk to you about, right? So there are quite a lot of changes that are happening in the business world. I'm sure many of you would be aware of it, but I would like you to take back from today key observable patterns that you can see. And next time when you come across that, you know, okay, this is going to affect us in some way or the other, positively or negatively, right? So that's what I would like to leave you with in this part of the preamble of the whole thing, right? So let's dig deep into the observable patterns. The first area on which I would like to talk about is what I call the workonomy level. And what is workonomy? That's a word that I use, where it's an intersection between the business and the economy, where these two intersect, which is mostly outside facing to an organization. At that part, if you really see, there are a significant amount of factors that are affecting us, right? First and foremost is definitely the political side of it. There's changes globally. There is regime changes. There is new governments coming in. And even if the government has come in, we really do not know whether the government is going to take, something is technically, there's a glitch or? Okay, so let me continue with that, right? So that's one part of it. And then there are also political angle to it in terms of people are trying to do a lot more today, right? So now the apprentice policy, someone talked about what's happening for unorganized sector. The recently launched apprentice policy from the government enables a lot of these white collar, blue collar, whatever, all of them to come to the organization and start going through an apprentice program, which is a paid program, which the government is also equally partaking in it. And if you have anyone more than 35 people involved in your organization, you are bound legally to kind of start doing this apprentice program. Look up on the internet if this is something that's coming our way pretty much, right? Economy, there's a lot of change in the economy. There is recession, there is war that is creating a lot of more problems, and there is inflation that is there. So there is huge amount of challenges, right? Then you look at the social dimension of it. Our workforce demographics have changed significantly, and all of you are witnessing it. Last week we saw one more trend that got changed. I'm sure all of you would have made note of it. There's a company which advertised for one single position, and 20,000 people applied for it. And also to say that I won't pay you a dime for a year, and you should pay me 20 lakhs on top of it, right? So it's marking out another disruption. People talked about disruption. This is another disruption. Probably in the near future, you would see organization competing for and people competing for whether it is, do I pay for education through the IIMs and all the elite MBA institutions, or do I also pay for my experience? So pay for experience or pay for your education is going to be a nice challenge to have in the future, right? And that's another thing that is happening. Technology, I think the previous panelists spoke at length about agentive AI and things like that. I'm not going to go into that, while I thought that might be interesting for you as well. But come next year, you would see autonomous agents coming into play, where that can supervise other autonomous agents. Microsoft is releasing that by about first, second quarter of next year. So which means to say the workforce of tomorrow, as someone mentioned in the previous panel, would contain humans and humanoids. And we need to start learning to figure out how do you assign job, get the job done, also become a co-worker for them. And you may have a 360 degree where the agentive AIs might start even giving you feedbacks and ratings. Okay? So that's the future that we have, right? And then there is quite a lot of environmental awareness that has been set. We talk about AI a lot, but the AI leaders have been questioned very clearly to become more responsible. Because AI consumes a significant amount of energy as we speak today. And that's another trend that will start setting in, which means either the cost of using AI might go up, or we'll have to find some other innovative solutions to manage that. And legal changes, there are significant legal changes that are happening because of many other changes that are happening. Let's dig deep a little bit more in terms of what is the other patterns that you see at the workplace itself. So in the workplace, you see, if you go to a Kirana store or to an MNC office, you'll see everything is digitalized, right? And you would get to see a lot of matrices, data, dashboards. People know what they have sold, what they have not sold, what are the matrices. So that's kind of become commoditized as of now. And you will also see algorithms coming in, and that's going to be a thing that we cannot avoid in the near future. In terms of workforce itself, they have also changed in the recent past, right? They are looking for, freedom. They are looking for work that is kind of contributing to the value of what they are trying to look at. And there is also a social connection that they are establishing, saying that I would like to work as a team, I would like to work from anywhere. So a lot of these things are also changing. The work itself has also changed. Organizations have started adopting things like experimentation, lean model, try to create certain MVPs, go and take it to the market and see if it is successful or not, and then sustain and move further from there. And the gig economy, both internally and externally, is also picking up. In fact, in my own organization, we have a gig economy internally, where we float out opportunities for people, where people can kind of subscribe to it, do their work at their own time or whatever, and then they get remunerated for it, right? And we complete a lot of projects without adding more people, right? So that's another change that we are seeing, and that's going to continue in the future as well. And then, of course, the communities, guilds, societies, and working as a collaborative thing to solve problems is what organizations are looking at. So this is the basic backdrop that I wanted to set out here. And I want to kind of now move into, if we have to make this journey towards the boardroom, we also need to understand what happens inside the boardroom. Yes or no? If you don't know what's happening inside a boardroom, which has always been a mystery, the CEOs don't come and tell us what really happens there. And the CHROs and our other fraternity business leaders won't come and tell us what exactly is happening there. So it's important to understand a few things about what happens inside a boardroom, and that's what I'm trying to go to share with you now. So I kind of put what's happening there into two areas. One is the thinking pattern, and the next I'll talk about is what do they really talk about, right? So in terms of the thinking pattern, they have 5 broad categories of thinking pattern that I'm being able to put together. These 5 are what you see on screen front. One is board really thinks about long-term sustainability of the organization, the continuity of the organization, resilience of the organization, the technology changes that are coming their way. How is it going to disrupt their business? How could I actually use that to actually go to the market with a better services or a product? That's another boardroom conversation. That's a boardroom thinking that's happening. And they are equally concerned, where they were not pretty much earlier, about what's called the workforce, and the workplace changes, right? That's what I call the 3 Ws. So they are also equally concerned now about the dynamics, the social demographic changes, and quite a lot of other things that are happening. The last 2 things have become a serious challenge for the board, and they are spending enough time in the post-pandemic era where they are looking at risk, governance, the social impact of the organization itself. That's where the thinking patterns have increased there, and leadership. and leadership succession and leadership performance. That's an area that they are trying to focus clearly, and that's the 5 thinking areas that I classify it as. Now let me move to what do they talk about, right? What would be the guess? Any one word? ROI, okay. What else? Growth. Sorry? P&L, okay. There's quite a lot of elements inside P&L, okay. So, future, okay. I put this word in front of you, they talk about only profit. Only profit, and I don't mean that word in the dictionary as profit, it's an acronym that I've created. It really means they focus on all of this. They talk about performance of the organization, of course, right, in terms of revenues and things like that. They talk about the resources that is available for them. They talk about the opportunity, the market that they can capture and things like that. They also talk about financials, which is, of course, a mandatory requirement. The last 2 are something where the board has taken specific interest in the last few years, right? And I've been talking to a few board of directors across the organization to understand why this shift. Last one, if you see the tenacity, I'll give you an example for it. There's a very, you would have heard this news, a leading multinational coffee brand, which sells coffee as an experience, right? I'm not naming all of them, fired their CEO just because for 2 quarters, the CEO did not produce the result, right? You may know who it is or Google and find out who it is. I'm not naming any company here. So that is the reason the board is taking performances of chief executive officers extremely serious. McKinsey in a research said that 38% of CEOs don't even last 3 years. It used to be about 10, 12 years, and a really performing CEOs even last only 8 years of late. This is in the S&P, the top 500 S&Ps, and they've also taken non-US companies to do this research. There's a good amount of literature around that. So the tenacity element has become a very, very serious aspect of the board, and they are taking this really seriously. And I can quote many examples of the CEOs getting fired, the CXOs getting fired, the CIOs getting fired for many of these things not happening. So there is definitely a lot of pressure in terms of delivering results, whatever the results may be depending on the role. And these are the 5 things that they talk about, and that's what I call as the profit. The conversation is around profit, right? So now let's take a look at what happens inside the learning and development organization. And many of you here would be in HR, learning and development. So what is our thinking pattern? If I were to call out 5 thinking patterns, what would they be? Sorry? Growth mindset, okay, fine. We don't think, is it? So many, you're not answering, so I think wondering whether do we even think? People-driven approach, okay, okay. Engagement, okay. Retention. Okay, so let me make things easier for you. Does it resonate with you? You put a learning and development guy in a room and ask him, and to put a business leader in front of him, right, and ask him not to do any small talk, or not to talk about family or yesterday's party. The only conversation will revolve around these topics, right? How do I personalize the content? How do I make it accessible to you? Is there a learning culture inside the organization, right? And then the learning technology, and that is the flavor of the month, right? So it is AI is an agentic one, and tomorrow it could be something else. It was LXP before, and then LMS, and so on and so forth. There's a never-ending element of going and talking about this to the business leader. Until unless that person is an extrovert, he will only talk about all of this, right? And then lastly, now maturity has progressed further inside the organization, we talk about measurement. But we talk about different levels of measurement thereafter, right? So this is what we speak. But what really is a thinking pattern, but what do we talk about is, I have coined a term which you may want to recollect here. I call this as the peppiness factor. This is the only thing that people speak in the learning and development fraternity. They talk about proficiency, they talk about essential skills or prerequisite skills. You can find a different equivalent to it, but all it means is we talk about essential skills, we talk about the psychological safety, the psychological well-being, then we talk about abilities, trades, drivers, right? And experiences, which is what I call it a seasoning, right? So every conversation that we have with people around us, with the business and within our team, revolves predominantly around this. There are exceptions to this also. I'm saying I'm broad-basing it. I'm not saying every organization is this way, but most organizations are definitely this way, right? So this is where we are, right? So now we know there is a huge gap, and we really need to bridge this gap if we have to get to the board. Even if you have to start knocking at the door, you need to bridge a huge gap, right? So here I present to you another model for you to remember. I call this as the AAA framework for you to kind of think through the steps. There are 3 dimensions to this. The dimension 1 is about the altitude of thinking. The learning and development team, what is the level of altitude of thinking that people, starting from the chief learning officer to the team, is able to carry through. The second is about the alignment. Where do they align with the business and the executive leadership and also the board for that matter? And lastly, how do we even articulate our success? We are pretty bad at it. The only thing that we know is we call the CEO for a launch event, we call the CEO for a closure event and ask him or her to send out an email saying that, okay, here happened, this is the program that has happened, 25 people went through the program, 15 of them completed, and the rest did not come, I am not responsible for it. Okay, so that's broadly how this thing is, but the articulation is important. I'll go a little deep into it now, right? So as we saw, the board and the CEO is interested in the altitude level of workonomy, not workforce, not at the bottom level, right? And their conversation on alignment is on profit, the profit being an acronym here, right? And the articulation that they expect us to do is ROI, someone spoke about ROI, return on expectation, return on investment, and how did it actually impact the business? Tell me the connection to it. If there is a developer who's writing a code and he is not able to test it well, and there are bugs that are getting into the next stage, right? I'm using an IT example since I spent pretty much amount of time there. So you need to connect this back saying that, no, I trained that person on a, unit testing is not going to help. You need to connect it back saying that how is it helping the organization in terms of getting it to market much earlier, right? The go-to-market timelines have come down because unit testing prevented something from happening going to the next stage, thereby the rework got reduced, and thereby you are able to actually produce and ship products much faster to the customer that is required. Just giving, I have 7 minutes, 22 seconds. Yeah. So the next one is about where we are today is in terms of the talent, right? So the learning and development today is at the altitude level of workforce. We go and talk about only workforce. And our alignment is around the peppiness factor, which I explained to you. How do we articulate our achievements? Skills change, certifications achieved. Maybe we have dropped the number of hours of learning that we have done. Okay, we have become a little matured there. So it's all a proxy to the same skill language. Skill or certification is a proxy to a skill, and skill is a proxy towards your training and things like that. So we are still around that space. To move there, you need to take 2 steps. Step 1, I know I'm not saying don't do the workforce level. You have to get it right, absolutely. That is bare minimum expectation. If you get that right, start working towards the next level of getting to a workplace level. The alignment, the altitude has to be at the workplace level, and workplace is denoted by what I call the PROCEED, which is another acronym for you to maybe capture, and we'll talk about it later. But it's all about, in simple terms, when I learn something, go back and apply on the job. What is going to come in my way of applying this on the job? What are the barriers at the workplace? What are the enablers at the workplace? L&D does not get involved in this at all. It says it is OD's responsibility or HR business partner's responsibility. My job is to put up a classroom, put up an e-learning, and it is not, after that I don't have any responsibility. That doesn't work. If you have to get to the board level, you have to start looking at elevating that to the workplace. Figure out what the barriers are, figure out what the enablers are, remove those barriers, and enhance or enrich or sustain at least the enablers that were there. And that is a significantly important role in the future for learning and development professional if they have to keep their job, right? And the articulation here is about reduction and elevation of the barriers and enablers, as simple as that. The last stage is about elevating the altitude of thinking to the work itself, right? The work itself is the biggest piece which we miss completely. And the alignment there has to happen to another acronym which I call PERFORM. Actually, you may not know what exactly goes inside this. If you wait till December, 4th of December, I'm actually writing an article on LinkedIn which will have details of all of this. I do have it here, but I have only 4 minutes, 52 seconds to complete my session. So I won't be able to cover all of that today, right? So, but the point here is, if you have done your training well, if you have removed the barriers well, that is the next stage, how did the change happen in that individual or a set of people? What behaviors changed, and when did the behaviors become sustained or more repeatable, and what impact did it create on the business metrics? The business metrics here, okay, the business metrics here possibly is all about to do with, example that I said to you is, if it is a unit testing guy, okay, what is the defect leakage that is going off to the production or testing, could be a simple metrics to deal with, right? So your articulation has to be what behaviors changed. You should be able to capture the behavior change clearly. The sustenance of that behavior, it's not one-time behavior change and the person slipping back to the old behavior again. What changed as a behavior and how did it impact the business metrics, right? Then you can elevate yourself to going on to a workonomy level. Then you are able to connect the business metrics to the profit metrics. So this broadly is the framework to kind of move forward. There are quite another few elements that are required, but I want to focus on the essence of it alone today. In the interest of time, this can be a day-long session. Yeah. But if you get your first level right, then only the first level right, that is the workforce level. If L&D is good at only the first level, we are able to put training there, we shouldn't call ourselves learning and development. We should call ourselves training and development. Our job is to only put information out there. Only when you get your second level, that is your workplace level correct, is when we should start calling ourselves learning and development, or the 1 and 2 together. When you have the workforce and the workplace level maturity and consistency achieved in your organization, the function which is involved in people, then only you call learning and development. But I'm proposing one more thing. If you get your third level right, stop calling yourself learning and development. Start calling yourself the Center for Human Performance Improvement. Our job and our role, someone said L&D will not exist, and I agree. We should shut down our L&D organization. In the shape and form it exists today, we should move towards either the Center of Human Performance Improvement. Our job is to improve the performance of every single employee in the organization who he or she needs improvement. That's our job, and that is what is the core purpose of why we exist. And that's where I would call it this way. And lastly, if you are able to get the work level done properly, and you are able to connect to the business, and you are able to work with that business, you have already got at least a door open in the boardroom, then call yourself not as even Center for Human Performance Improvement, call yourself the Talent Profit Center. Because you are directly contributing to some of the top. The board is interested in top line, bottom line, that's it, period. Right? That's predominantly what I call it profit, right? And a few accessories along with that. If this is done, then is when we are actually getting a seat at the table of the board. Right? So this journey of yours from all the way from HR realm to the broad realm has to move from focusing on workforce all the way up to focusing on the workonomy level and elevating your abilities from talking about only the peppiness factor and go all the way up to the profit dimension and connection. So with this, I wish you all the very best for the journey. You might be in different stages of maturity, but I wish you all the greatness for life in this journey, and that's about it. I'm giving back 1 minute and 1 second.